Good morning, good evening, good welcome to everybody. Happy December. And of course, I am thrilled to bring on Kristin this morning, who is one of the most passionate leaders that I have worked with, who is so brand centric, but so focused on people and so focused on development and so focused on growth that it's almost contagious, the way that she makes you really think about the important things in your career journey. And so I'm thrilled to welcome Kristin this morning to our webinar, and so excited about the content that she's going to be sharing with all of us. Quick, just a little housekeeping. I will be monitoring the chat. If you have a question come up, feel free to drop it in the chat. Everybody should have full access to that. And then naturally, Kristin can either answer along the way, or at the end, we'll make sure that we're saving some time for Q&As. But with that, I've certainly spoken enough. The person you're all here to see, welcome, Kristin. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Ron, for the introduction, for the invitation, and thank you for what you've invested into not only this series, but also continuing to invest in P&G alumni. The community is certainly strong. I'm glad to see some familiar names who have joined, and friends and former colleagues, Anne-Marie, Danielle, Scott, and many others who I don't know yet, but look forward to getting to know. So thank you all for being with us today, especially as we are engaging and getting ready for the holidays. It looks like the chat is disabled. So
I will go ahead and make sure that is changed for us,
okay,
Kristin.
perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you for that. I'll go ahead and share my screen. This will be a session where I'm pretty engaged and able to usually see the chat as we go along. So feel free to chat once that is available. And we will certainly leave some time at the end for you to come off mic and ask questions as well. So with that, we are going to jump into today's topic, grit and grace, staying rooted, resilient, and ready in high stakes moments. I don't know about you, but 2025 has been one of those years that, shall I say, I don't want to repeat. But I have learned and grown so much from it. And let me just say that we are all here, and that is worthy of a celebration. So I'm just going to briefly introduce and give you some background for those of you who I don't know. I am Kristin Harper, the founder and CEO of Driven to Succeed, and I started my career at Procter & Gamble. In fact, I started as an intern, was recruited. Anne-Marie, you may have been part of recruiting me to P&G in brand management, and spent almost 9 years at P&G in the brand function in various capacities, managing brands on the delivery side, in innovation, in shopper marketing and professional marketing. So a lot of amazing experience. Then I went on to the Hershey company and spent 5 years there, and then Cardinal Health, where I ended as a global vice president of marketing, a Fortune 20 company in my hometown. I started Driven to Succeed full-time 6 years ago as I was doing work that I realized was not really a passion point for me. I was contributing certainly to the P&L, but doing operational projects and, cutting costs, and that definitely helped to build the business, but it wasn't something that I was passionate about. And so my husband said, "Have you considered entrepreneurship?" And I said, "Would you support me?" And he said, "Yes." So here we are. So we beat the odds. But I started off, I wrote a book, and my intention was to be a speaker and trainer. I wrote a book, The Heart of a Leader, 52 Emotional Intelligence Insights to Advance Your Career. And that book has benefited many, many people. And it's based on my experience as a leader and a employee and a manager of people. That book has been featured in a number of publications, which has been pretty cool. And then when COVID happened, speaking became a commodity. And so I had to reinvent the business and reinvent what I would deliver. And And that's when I expanded into market research. So the business has been twofold in that case. And I'm proud to say that we've worked with a number of Fortune 1000 companies, private and PE-backed companies, government agencies, universities, nonprofits, and of course, as my core is brand, marketing, and managing businesses and P&Ls and leading people. I've managed global iconic brands, including some at P&G like Crest and Oral-B and Align, and others like Hershey's Kisses, probably my most fun role and where I really got to know Ron in the middle of central Pennsylvania, and some iconic healthcare brands that are known among clinicians but less known among consumers. So with that background, let's jump in to today's content. So I want to share that these are my experiences, these are my reflections, these are my insight as an individual, a citizen, and a servant. Several years ago, when at that time Cardinal Health had made its largest acquisition in company history, my team expanded and my role expanded. And having been a part of a VP leadership development program at the company, I learned a technique that I utilized with that new team. We took a hour and a half long lunch, and I brought in food, of course. And then I gave everyone a piece of paper, a pen, and read a poem from a lady named George Ella Lyon, who wrote a poem called Where I'm From. I will tell you that after I gave the team time to write their Where I'm From story, and we shared it with each other, there were things that I learned from people that I had worked with for many years just in those 15 minutes of sharing. And we built our connections, we formed new bonds, a new rapport, but more importantly, we got to learn about what people's values and their principles are. So I've since created a visual Where I'm From story, and I'm going to share it with you now. Where I'm from. I'm from Joan and Richard Tucker, a social worker turned entrepreneur and Christian counselor mom, and a compassionate blue-collar dad whose recurring epilepsy challenged his profession in sales but didn't kill his spirit. The only grandchild of Betty Marie, whose wisdom and love of nearly 98 years drew me back to my hometown of Columbus, Ohio, after being away for nearly 2 decades, college, and building my career. Most people are surprised to learn that I'm an only child, fiercely independent, a serial entrepreneur who started at the tender age of 14, teaching piano to 4-year-olds and 80-year-olds alike. I'm an explorer, a risk taker, and a global traveler who loves to experience other cultures and understand people's one-of-a-kind story. This led me from class presidency at a public high school on the east side of Columbus to Florida A&M University, one of the largest historically Black colleges and universities. Throughout my journey, passion, belief, and a willingness to be the change I wish to see has compelled me to lead national protests against inequitable education policies and to spend countless hours leading and volunteering with young people to find their path to success at my job and in the community. I'm a wife who divorced and remarried my college sweetheart. I believe in restoration. I believe in transformation. Anything is possible. God has called me to minister to others, but my first ministry is to my family and our 3 children. I work hard. I love hard. I play hard. I endeavor to lead this world better for me having been here, and that is where I'm from. So I'm glad that the chat is available now, because I'd love for you to tell me in the chat, that was probably 2 minutes. What did you learn about my values and principles from what I shared with you and my origin story and where I'm from? And you can put it in the chat or you can unmute, whatever you want to do.
So everyone is available to speak. So that's on, and everybody should be available to chat as well. So hopefully that is working. There we go.
Awesome. Family anchored, community centered. One of my values is giving back. Absolutely. Fiercely independent, a warrior. Great example. Thank you. All of those things are true. Family is everything. Community impact, inspirational and inspiration. Thank you so much. Can you see how powerful this exercise is and how quickly you can get to know the root and the foundation and the principles of what makes up a person, their experiences, their values, etc. Passion, community, love, compassion. Thank you. Your heart beats for community as well. Absolutely. There's profits and there's people, and you can't have one without the other. And so I think that that's so important when it comes to not only business, but any endeavor that we lead. Inquisitive explorer. I love that. Thank you so much. So let me tell you a story. And of course, that exercise related to principles and values. And so I encourage you to consider your Where I'm From story. It doesn't take long. It's interesting. I've never done this exercise with my family. Maybe that's something we'll do over the holidays, is capture our unique Where I'm From stories as well. Compassion and curiosity for those experiencing challenges. Absolutely. So what are principles? Principles are fundamental truths, rules, beliefs that act as a foundation. It's a foundation for a system, behavior, judgment, guiding actions and decisions. And we all have principles. We all have formative experiences. In fact, one of my favorite exercises is creating a cardiogram, just charting the highs and the lows and the in-betweens. I call it the highlights and the lowlights of our lives, because those highlights and our lowlights, they not only shape us, but they also form new principles. So let me tell you about this little girl who graduated from Columbus and decided to go 3 states away to a leading historically Black college or university, Florida A&M University. At the time, the president was Dr. Frederick S. Humphreys, truly an icon, a legend, a visionary, and his legacy continues to this day, even though he's since passed on. I also wanted to attend the School of Business and Industry. This school, SBI, was founded in 1974 and had a powerful reputation based on its founder and visionary, the founding dean, Dr. Sybil Collins Mobley, who you see on the bottom right. It was praised as the Marine Corps of business schools, a top-rated HBCU. SBI draws Fortune 500 and other companies to prepare its graduates. And I'll show you some of the alumni who were also P&G alumni as well, integrating professional development and philanthropy and global immersion and mandatory internships. And I wanted to be part of that legacy. The SBI Big Board is a legacy of giving where companies, corporations, and now even individuals invest $100,000 at a minimum. And that goes into a philanthropy and into an endowment so that the investment can last for generations and for years to come. And isn't that a powerful mantra as you think about what your legacy is? What legacy can you leave in this world that will pay dividends for generations to come? I was with some excellent company. Here are some P&G alumni who are also attendees and alumni of Florida A&M University, many of which I was in school with, who have gone on to be at the height of their various careers in C-suite and other areas beyond, even across the world and the globe. My friend Ayana was even named by Time Magazine as one of America's most influential African Americans last year. And so we were with very good company, and I'm actually speaking at commencement later this week. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is how it's an annuity. Just like being a P&G alumni pays dividends over time, the same thing is true for alumni of Florida A&M University. There's something called the SBI Forum. The SBI Forum is when students dress up in hot Florida weather in business suits, for young ladies in heels and in stockings. I mean, it was some miserable days in that Tallahassee sun going to SBI Forum. But this is when corporate leaders come back and speak and engage in formal and informal setting with students to prepare them. And here I was on the left-hand side as a student. That FAMU also has a 5-year MBA program where you get your bachelor's and MBA in 5. It took me 6, but who's counting? But here I was on the left-hand side as a student in SBI. And a few years ago, 10 years ago now, I was able to come back as a forum speaker, engage and meet the then president at the time. And so I'm sharing with you some of these formative experiences to lay the groundwork for what I'm going to share around grit and grace. I was elected the first female student body president in nearly a decade, and only the third student government president in FAMU history. Had the opportunity to engage with some amazing people, build formative relationships, make a difference on campus, and speak speak up for the university. And here's Dr. Humphreys again when I was inducted as vice president of student government and eventually president. Now, he was larger than life. In fact, at homecoming this year, a statue was installed of Dr. Humphrey. And one of his signature phrases, he has an entire charge called the Rattler Charge. His signature phrase is, "You must always remember the rattlers will strike and strike and strike again." And so with that, what I shared with you in my Where I'm From story, which was created before the next set of stories I'm going to share with you, these experiences have shaped the person I am, the legacy I want to leave. And Dr. Humphreys was a tremendous role model. And so in October of 2019, 1 month before I became a full-time business entrepreneur and business owner, I was appointed to the Florida A&M Board of Trustees. Now, this is the governing board that governs the university and for whom the president reports to the members of the 13-member board of trustees. And so the first takeaway I want to share with you formally, and hopefully you're gaining and benefiting from what I'm sharing and more to come, is that service is the rent you pay for your time, for room on this earth. And we all have gifts, we all have talent, we all have unique skills. And so there are times in life where we can give more, and there are times in life where we need to fall back and reallocate our time to other space. So let's talk a little bit, now that we've talked about principles, let's talk about power dynamics. So I was elected vice chair and subsequently unanimously elected as chair of the board. And know that every organization has a culture. In fact, Dean Mobley with the School of Business and Industry was so provocative and visionary. One of the mandatory elements of being a student was reading a book, Ropes to Skip and Ropes to Know. In other words, what are the written rules and what are the unwritten rules you need in order to thrive in various circumstances, certainly within the corporate space, but truly any organization. We also had professional development to help to teach us the nuances, the intangibles, how to engage, etc. with others. Every organization has governance. So in this case, the board has bylaws. And of course, you have Robert's Rules of Order, and having served on other boards, the same is true here. I like to say, though, that in higher education, particularly for public institutions, it is a regulated industry. There are laws, there are statutes, there are policies, there are regulations. And one of the most challenging laws that I had to navigate is something called the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law in the state of Florida, and it applies in some other states as well, is essentially the public has a right to know what is happening with public officials. And so meetings are recorded. Meetings often are on camera. Sometimes meetings are simulcast and they're transcribed and they can live in perpetuity. The Sunshine Law also mandates that any business that will come before the board now or in the future cannot be discussed by the decision maker. And so it was a very different dynamic of engaging with colleagues and certainly being in a position of leadership, elected leadership, to navigate a Sunshine Law. And I will tell you that I tended to be very prescriptive and very bound with that law. And so when you're coming into new leadership roles, you have all these visions of what will be achieved. But as New Edition says, storms will come. This we know for sure, but can you stand the rain? In 2024, there was a tornado in Tallahassee, Florida. In September was Hurricane Helene. Lightning would flash sometimes in the middle of meetings. Interestingly, right around the time that shenanigans were taking place, there was a national Zoom outage that led to canceled meetings. There were all types of challenges that tested our resolve, our resilience, and how we would respond in high stakes moments. One of the most high stakes moments that I experienced early in my tenure as chair was a proposed gift that was of high substance and consequence to the university that turned out to be a fraudulent. Now, at the time, I was having lunch in another room and someone asked me to come in. And so with trust, I came into a room, not knowing what was going to happen. And almost immediately, there was a staged signing of a document. And during that meeting, I was asked to sign as a witness. And having reviewed multiple contracts throughout my career and service, I know that as a witness, that doesn't bind me to what's in the contract or document, but I didn't know and had not read or was not aware even of the situation. That turned into a pretty substantive situation and moment. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because there's the stimulus, there's the circumstance, there's the challenge, there's the conflict, and then there's your response. What action are you going to take? What is the attitude that you will engage with? What's the approach? And in between the stimulus and the response is a choice. You see, why that turned out to be a consequential event is because of the public nature of not only the university, but of this particular event, which happened during commencement. So it was already a high stakes moment of consequence for so many graduates, which was, the primary role and the reason that we were there. But it turned out that this gift was not actually real. It was a fraudulent gift. And given some of the circumstances I shared with you earlier around the sunshine laws, etc., the perception is that I was aware of this gift, that I was aware of the donor prior to that moment, and I was not. That was on a Saturday. Sometimes I call it before AD and before May 5th and after May 5th. One of the lessons I learned is that it's important to shape your own narrative, and that part of empathy is responding as if it were you, is understanding as if it were you. But part of communication, particularly with reputation management, is responding in the moment. And empathy also happens in the moment when it is best. I, in hindsight, should have responded sooner, but ultimately about a week later, I made a public statement on behalf of the board, but also as soon as that Monday, I sent a message to the board to let them know that we would investigate and that we would really understand what happened here. So there was media attention. There were some who capitalized on this situation and the misperception. And ultimately, it was investigated. My name was cleared, but it caused a lot of havoc for the university. Our then president resigned. There was so much change. There was an interim president that was appointed. There was leadership turnover. A presidential search process was launched, which again was bound by, in this case, closed meeting rules. So unlike the sunshine, the presidential search process was bound by closed meeting rules, so the public was not privy to what was happening. There was political interference with presidential appointments that was happening across the state and really across the country. And there was a shift to more political appointees versus traditional candidates like those who are academicians and had spent their time in higher education. And the slate that came out of the appointed presidential search committee that I was not a part of did include 3 traditional candidates and 1 non-traditional candidate. And so you can imagine, especially with what I've shared with you, there are rattlers just like me who are deeply passionate about our alma mater. And thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Yes, I did navigate a lot of storms. And I did my best to keep our alma mater safe. And yes, Tajer, Dr. Humphreys was an incredible leader and icon. Yes, referred to as the most consequential leader of our time. And so with Dr. Humphreys and Dean Mobley and just that rattler spirit of striking and striking and striking again, there's so much passion, right, that came from this decision. There were over 16,000 signatures on a change.org petition. Trustees, I received literally hundreds of emails, and I over time responded to as many as I could, hopefully almost all. There were public forums where the community came and they spoke their piece for each of the 4 candidates. There was a survey that we conducted, and one of the things that was interesting, the survey was conducted every day after each of the 4 candidates. And this is the power of innovation, prayer, and AI. There were hundreds of responses to these surveys every day. And I said, how can we summarize this? And God gave me use AI to summarize it all. And so every day I worked with the IT team and they independently summarized feedback. But there were literally over 1,000 people who replied to these surveys. And the survey was very overwhelming and very clear and very consistent in its outcomes, because alumni, student, community members wanted one particular candidate, but some of my colleagues chose another. There were even some parliamentary changes that were made as it relates to protocol, and ultimately voting that a colleague on the board and not the chair negotiate the contract. So many things happen, but grit and grace. This is what I've learned. There's an invisible iceberg. Above the iceberg are the actions, what's said, what you can hear, what you can see, the facial expressions, the tone of voice. But underneath every decision are those invisible factors that are sometimes driving decision, the values and beliefs, which is why it's so important for each of us to understand and know what our values are, what your principles are, and sometimes there are competing priorities. And so I didn't take it personal. I didn't take it personal when 8 of my colleagues voted for the candidate that the community did not want, because I know that there are no right or wrong answers. There's only trade-offs. So the question in life is, which trade-offs are you willing to make? I chose to focus on my principles, my value, and to stand with the community and alumni and students and many faculty members, because I knew that my time as chair and as a trustee was temporary, but my legacy would last forever. And so, as they would say, I stood on business. I balanced my role as a chair and as a trustee. And what was so difficult about this is that it was all being not only recorded, but there were thousands of people watching simultaneously. And so I had to come to the meeting prepared, knowing my Robert's Rules of Order, knowing the rules and regulations, but knowing that this was a moment, this was not forever. And so the lesson here is, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for it. And that comes from Malcolm X. So let's talk a little bit about presence. Emotional intelligence is the core of what my book on The Heart of a Leader is about: emotional intelligence and leadership. And there are 4 domains of emotional intelligence: emotional self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And one of the most important aspects of emotional intelligence for me is having nuanced and great emotional vocabulary. This is one of my favorite tools, the emotion wheel, because there are hundreds of emotions. And emotions are just clues. They're just clues about what else is going on that may need to be investigated. But I had a great mentor who is still a mentor, who led a healthcare business during COVID. And he gave me, and he's also a Rattler, FAMU alum. He gave me some very solid advice. Stay focused on the eye of the storm. And so when you are going through challenges, staying focused and limiting distractions to the extent that you can is really important. And that helped me during that season. You're welcome to take a screenshot of this. These are some principles and some tools and some practices around emotional intelligence, and a couple that I want to just highlight. One is in the self-awareness at the bottom. Be clear about your who you serve and why. For me, my service has always been in this capacity to Rattlers, and my North Star has always been student success and the perpetuity of the institution so that FAMU will last forever. And those are the principles that have guided my decision making. And so being clear about your who and your why. Under self-management, this second one here, well, I'll say the first one is pause. We don't always have to respond quickly. In fact, in social media this year, for my personal social media, I've chosen not to focus on being in the moment and not being so pressed about posting what's happening. But also when we are communicating and engaging with others, there is power in the pause. It's also important, I believe, to be passionate, but to balance passion with dispassionate, being dispassionate. What is dispassionate? Dispassionate is being balanced It's being neutral in our communications, but knowing that sometimes we have to turn the volume up and sometimes we need to turn the volume down. But certainly when it comes to leadership, being dispassionate, social awareness, seeking wise counsel, and the multitude of counselors, there is safety. So who is in your, what my friend and mentor and sorority sister calls your kitchen cabinet, who you can engage to get perspective from multiple points of view. And then relationship management. I always love praising others, which is part of what I integrated at the beginning of highlighting other P&G alum and also other FAMU alum, but also knowing how to say no, because sometimes our plates are full, and to give without expectation. The other thing that's important for me, this is one of the most formative books that I've ever read, 30 Days to Taming Your Tongue. And I am a Christian, and so it refers to many Bible verses. But one of the things I believe is you can't unflush a toilet and you can't unspeak a word. So guard your tongue. So know, just like Robin Williams said, that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So be kind always. And I was blessed to have some amazing friends and sorority sisters with my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, who showed up for me at critical moments, who sent text messages, who called to check on me, etc. But it also disconnected. I have the most amazing husband in the world. He took me on a dream trip to The Price is Right to LA, and he actually made it all the way to the Showcase Showdown. So it's important to also disconnect and to engage with others who fill your cup, because our identity is not exclusive to our title. And so it's important always to go back to our values, our formative experiences, and know that, like Michelle Obama said, we are still becoming. So my lesson in this section is to give yourself to yourself before you give yourself away. And that comes from Susan Taylor, who is the former editor of SMAC. So let's talk a little bit about purpose and your personal brand. It was unpopular among some to make the decision that I made and that 3 other colleagues made in the search and selection process. And it was very difficult during those moments because, again, I was very strict with not only my confidentiality requirement and sunshine rules and laws, but I also did not proactively reach out to others. And that's a lesson that I learned, is that I need to engage and ask people for what I need. And sometimes I don't even know what I need. And I think that comes from being that fiercely independent only child, and a lesson that I'm still learning to this day. But what I can say is that after that May 16th vote and the subsequent confirmation by the regulating body, the Board of Governors, who ultimately approved the presidential selection, I was overwhelmed with love. That day, you can see in the bottom left, students brought me roses. After that, I got so many gifts unsolicited. Even one I got last weekend from a friend and former classmate. And gosh, so much that was on social media. And this is the one in the middle. The ancestors are moving mountains to see you ride. Sometimes having that quiet confirmation from others is so important. And so who are you being that support to? Because again, we are all going through situations that we may not post and publicize, but being that encouragement to others is so important, because your flowers will come. And sometimes it comes in the form of unanticipated standing ovations, like the one I got at homecoming, where as the new chair, the newly elected chair, was introducing members of the board, the entire audience of thousands of people stood up with a standing ovation that lasted for, gosh, well over a minute. It felt like forever. I ultimately had to say, okay, sit down. But even through all of those difficult moments, I always had to remember my why and what legacy I wanted to leave. My why has always been students. And in the upper left-hand corner, you can see this is my favorite picture ever, because sitting on the stage at commencement and seeing students who walk across that stage, and in this case, she jumped for joy because she earned her diploma. That is the why. That is the payoff of all of the sleepless nights, the tears, the agony, the strategic thinking, the solitude, the engagement. That is the why. And I'm also really proud that I was able to lead the strategic plan prior to becoming the chair, boldly striking. And ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. And sometimes we have to trace the fruit to the root. So the root was this strategy, and the fruit are the outcome that I can say that FAMU has achieved, not because of, but because of the vision of the board and the implementation of the president and their leadership teams and alumni and the community. So FAMU is now the for the seventh consecutive year, the number one public historically Black college or university in the country. And so many more accolades, including when we established the Boldly Striking Strategic Plan, we were in the 115 or so of public universities. We broke into the top 100 and got as high as number 81, number 20 for social mobility. And that is essentially how can students move from one socioeconomic class to the next. So I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish. Record high performance-based funding scores, which is the model that higher education is in the state of Florida is governed by. Record high four-year graduation rate. FAMU is one of 27 institutions that's both a Carnegie Research 2 as well as an Opportunity College or University. And part of the Boldly Striking Strategic Plan includes a vision to become a Research 1 institution. And so we are well on our way. Multiple athletic conferences, conference titles and national championships, and much, much more. But this, I've already said it before, but this is what I want to leave you with in this section, that titles are temporary, character lasts forever. And so, as my husband often says to our teenage son, don't trade minute for hours or day. My last section I want to share with you is around pivoting to prosper. After that gift in May of 2024, that next Friday, I was scheduled for a all-day national symposium for women business owners. And I came into the hotel where the event was happening at around 8:30 a.m. and I got stuck in the lobby until about 3:15 p.m. working on the crisis communications response from the gift. I missed the entire conference. These are the moments that people don't see. People see what's posted in media and shared, but they don't sometimes understand the sacrifices that have been made. And so I want to salute you for whatever sacrifices you are making for the benefit of your organization, your family, your community. And I ran into a friend once I finally came upstairs, Regina, who said something so provocative to me. She said, we don't always have to know everything that's coming in the future. Sometimes all we can focus on is the best next step. And that was heartening to me, especially for so many of us, especially P&G alumni. Strategy is baked into who we are. And what I also know is that some chapters aren't meant to be fit, they're just meant to be closed. I read an incredible book a few months ago as I knew that my chapter as a trustee was closing in January of next year. That's next month, and I am so excited. And that my time as chair was ending in September. And that book was called Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. I encourage you to read this book. He's also the author of the book Boundary. And there's so many lessons from the book, but one that I want to share with you is how he talks about rosebush. For rose bushes to achieve their full potential, systematic pruning is necessary. In fact, he says that pruning is the process of proactive, and a lot of times in life, we're not taught how to end well. And so thinking about endings and when there's a necessary end, he says there's 3 times when endings are necessary, and he actually used GE as an example and several other examples. Number 1, when the resources have more promise elsewhere. In other words, if you're getting average result in relation to where you could be or what you could be achieving, it may be time for a necessary. Number 2, if the rose bush is sick, or the situation is sick and won't get well, it may be time for a necessary. And number 3, if it's already dead. And sometimes we have to call a thing a. And so reading this book helped me in my process of closing this chapter and making room for what God has next for me. This was another situation I didn't expect. At the end of my term as chair, there was another standing ovation from my colleagues as well as those in the room, a bouquet of roses as well as a plaque. And so I want to leave you with 10 steps to bounce forward. And you could take a screenshot of this, and thank you, Ron, for including the screenshot in the chat as well. But 10 steps to bounce forward. This is part of the content that I sometimes speak about, and having done significant research in my book, confronting reality, reflecting deep, facing the stark realities and even the worst case scenarios. And grieving happens more than just when someone passes away. Grieving happens when there is a misalignment between expectations and reality, when we're closing new chapters, when there are disappointment, and when we need to move on because of circumstance or because of choice. So disengage from previous goals, create new goals, believe in yourself, engage your wise counsel, your kitchen cabinet, take risks, move toward new goal achievement, and then celebrate success and learn from failure, because what's possible is post-traumatic growth. I read an amazing book as I was researching and did a whole bibliography. Lots of, I once wanted to get a PhD, but I decided not to. But I felt like I was writing a dissertation when I did research for my book. But there's a notion called post-traumatic growth. You can grow even after trauma. And so going back to that May 2024 gift, what I realized, and another friend and mentor told me, own your narrative, write your own narrative. So I learned that I needed to shape and write my own narrative in the moment. And so as I closed in this chapter, I wrote a letter to FAMU students and alumni, again, the audience that I have always endeavored to serve. And I recorded a video. Now, interesting from a marketing perspective, the letter got lots of views, but the video has over 7,000 views from what I can see. So it's important to engage in multimedia. And so my last lesson is I reserve the right to change my mind. Life is not fixed. Life is flexible, and we can make different choices. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that I started as a student, and the president, the one who I did not vote for, but who has come to appreciate my integrity, my service to the university, asked me to speak at this week's commencement. A very, very tall honor, and something that I'm excited to be able to do, to impart wisdom, hopefully, and inspiration to graduates, alumni, family, and friends alike. And so as my mom says, it doth not yet appear what you shall. So 5 P's to stay rooted, resilient, and ready in high stakes moments. Be clear about your principles. Understand the power dynamic. Manage your present. Live purposeful and stay on your personal brand. And sometimes you have to pivot to prosper. I would love to engage with you. This is my contact information, my website, email, and social media handles. So I know we have just a couple minutes left, and I know that Ron has some information he wants to share, and I'm also happy to answer any questions. Thank you all so much for being with us today, for engaging in the chat, in person, and investing your time.
Wow, Kristin, that was so amazing. I am so inspired. I've literally been smiling ear to ear. And I have to say, for as much as I feel like I know you because we've worked together, clearly there is so much about you that I hadn't known, and am now even more, so thrilled to call you a colleague and a friend. So thank you so much for sharing. Certainly, if there's anybody who has any questions, you can feel free to put that in the chat. I won't take up too much time, but we would love for you to get involved with your P&G local alumni chapters. So check out the website, look at those. After our recording today, we will edit this video. We will post it on the P&G Enrichment Series YouTube channel, where you can watch other amazing videos and even go back. I know I gave you a lot of screen grabs, but there are so many moments where I'm like, I'm going to go back and watch this and screen grab, because there are so many great quotes and conversations. And then, of course, lastly, be looking out for our Enrichment Series webinars starting in 2026. That first one will be in March. And of course, you can register for that. But let's see, Kristin, we have lots of thanks. Of course, course, so many thanks for sharing your story. And really, I've been doing the alumni enrichment webinar for, almost 2 years. Certainly, this has been a highlight for me and one of my favorites. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it, and so glad that you all could join. I hope that you found this beneficial, inspirational, and that you too will take action and think through what your principles, your values are, and what legacy you want to. And I'll say that when it comes to legacy, it wasn't always something that was top of mind. I was just focused on what's the right next step. Because we can't always see the panoramic long time view, especially when there's so many dynamics that change so often.
Thank you so much, Kristin. I love the idea of legacy. I actually wrote it down a couple of times, and I think it's just something to really think of and should be top of mind. Have a wonderful holiday rest of the year. I hope everybody gets some time to rest and relax, spend time with family, friends, or maybe your resting and relaxing is not spending time with your family and friends, but whatever you choose to do, have a great holiday season and so much success looking forward to 2026. Thanks everyone for joining this morning.